You wake up to the most annoying thing that you can think of, the sound of your alarm going off. Is it really already 6:30? You swear you literally just fell asleep. You sigh and you slowly sit up. Why must school start so early, you ask yourself, and if you're anything like me, you ask yourself the same question every single morning. All students go through this, and I believe it's because public schools are starting too early in the morning. My name is Kenya Cummings, and today I'm going to talk to you about why I think that public schools need to start later in the morning opposed to earlier. If public school started later in the morning, students' grades would improve because they would get the sleep that they need and in turn would be a lot healthier. First of all, students need to get their sleep. Sleep is very important for students and students need to get the recommended hours of sleep. According to nationwidechildrens.org, teens are only getting 7 to 7.5 hours of sleep on average, when studies show that students actually need exactly 9.5 hours of sleep. So let's just do a little bit of math here. If teens start school at 8, they get out around 3, get home by 4, that means that they'd have to go to sleep exactly at 8 p.m. to get the recommended hours of sleep. But even if you were able to go to sleep exactly at 8 p.m. every single night, National Sleep Foundation states that adolescents don't start releasing melatonin until 11 p.m. at night. And they don't start pumping it until later in the morning, which is why it's so hard for teens to wake up early in the morning. Most students are sleep deprived because they aren't getting the sleep that they need, and not only that, but a lot of teens also participate in extracurricular activities within their school. For example, I was a cheerleader, and during basketball season, we have at least 3 to 4 games a week on average. For some that we would have to travel for, we wouldn't get home until around 11 to 1 a.m. in the morning for the far games. If you do the math, if you're getting home around 12, having to take a shower, needing to lay down for at least 30 minutes before you can fall asleep, you're only getting about 7 hours of sleep, and that's depending on how far you live from the school. And not to mention that the recommended amount of study time for students is 3 hours when you get home. So even if you got home around 6:30, you'd still have to take a shower and do your homework and go over your notes to study for your tests. In addition, students would get better grades and they would be healthier. If public schools started later in the day, students would have better grades. And according to ifiscience.org, there was a study in the UK where they issued a start time for students of 10 a.m. And for the students that were issued the 10 a.m. start time, they saw an increase in the students' grades. I can use some of my own experience to back up this study because for 4 years straight, 6th through 9th grade, I had first period math. For those 4 years, I never seemed to get my grade up higher than a C in every math class. Honestly, I just thought I wasn't good at math. And it was frustrating for me because math is one of the very most important classes that you have throughout the day, and it was very hard for me to remember anything from first period. And because of that, I had C's in my classes, and I just thought I just wasn't good at math. But the next year, I ended up having my algebra, the class after lunch. So, with it being later in the day, I noticed that I actually did comprehend more of the material, and I ended up passing the class with a B. Now, I thought maybe it could just be a coincidence, so my 12th grade year, I also had my Algebra 2 class, the period before lunch, which is around 10:30 to be exact. That year, I also did pass the class with B, so I knew that it couldn't be just the fact that it wasn't it wasn't just a coincidence. And I actually noticed that any class, whether it was math or government class first period, I wasn't remembering anything, and I was finding it a lot harder to remember anything from my first 2 classes of the morning. And I also did have to study a lot harder to pass those classes so early in the morning. So I do agree with ifiscience.com, where they did talk about the study in the UK. I do agree that the later your class is, the more successful you'll be in the class. But not only will you be more successful in school if it starts later in the day, but you will be also a lot more healthier. In an article that I read by Craig Canapri called Too Much Homework, Too Little Sleep, Structural Sleep Deprivation in Teens, it had a lot of great information. According to his article, recent research has connected some health issues with lack of sleep. Some examples of health issues that are connected with lack of sleep included depression, anxiety, diabetes, and obesity. A lot of teens suffer from one of these health issues, at least one of them, anxiety. I know I have anxiety, and I've suffered from it all my life so far, but these issues are associated with lack of sleep. So if students were getting their recommended hours of sleep, they have a better chance of not having any of these health issues. In conclusion, public schools need to start later in the morning. Now that you've watched my video, I hope that you agree with me that students should start public school later in the morning. The public school starting later in the morning would allow students to get their sleep, and because of them getting the sleep that they need, they do a lot better in school. They would be a lot more successful in school. They would be a lot healthier, and they would not suffer from any health issues such as obesity, diabetes, depression, or anxiety. If public school started later in the morning, students' grades would improve because their bodies don't stop releasing melatonin until later in the morning, which is what makes it hard for us to wake up so early. So I hope now that you go to the National Sleep Study and read their articles so that you too agree that public schools should start later in the morning opposed to earlier.